I'll never forget how quiet the house became after my father died. It wasn't the kind of silence you notice in passing, it was heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Every creak of the old floorboards carried too far, every door shutting sounded like an ending. I stayed longer than I should have after the funeral, half because I didn't want her to be alone, half because, well, I couldn't explain the other half. She was sitting at the kitchen table that first night, my stepmother. 46, maybe 47, though she carried herself like she had already lived 3 lifetimes. Her hair was pulled back in a way that only made the tired lines around her eyes more striking. She wasn't trying to look composed, and that made her look real. I remember standing by the sink, pretending to rinse a glass that was already clean, because I couldn't find the right words. She didn't cry the way I thought she would. Instead, she stared at her untouched cup of tea like it was a stranger. "You don't have to stay," she said softly, not looking up. "I know," I answered, maybe too quickly. "But I want to." She gave the smallest nod, like she was both relieved and guilty. Her hand brushed over the rim of her mug, tracing circles, and for a moment I wanted to reach out, not to comfort her exactly, but to stop her from drifting somewhere I couldn't follow. The hours stretched. We talked about nothing and everything, who had called, what arrangements still needed sorting. But under each word was a different conversation neither of us dared to name. I caught myself studying the way she breathed before answering me, the way her lips pressed together when she didn't know how to say something out loud. At one point, she glanced at me across the dim kitchen, and I swear the air tightened. It wasn't dramatic, not like the movies. It was subtler than that, like we had accidentally stepped too close to a line we weren't supposed to cross. I looked away first, pretending to check my phone, though there was nothing there. When I finally stood to leave, she reached out, not for me, but for the glass in my hand. Our fingers brushed. Too long. Too deliberate to be entirely innocent. "Thank you for being here," she said, voice low, almost breaking. I wanted to answer something simple, something safe, but what came out was, "I don't want to be anywhere else." Her eyes lingered on me then, sharp and searching, like she was trying to see if I meant more than I should. I couldn't tell if she found what she was looking for. The silence returned, heavier now, threaded with something unnamed. I set the glass down and stepped back, though every part of me resisted leaving that moment. She folded her hands in her lap, looked down, and whispered, "There's something I need to ask you." Her voice carried a weight I wasn't ready for. Before she could continue, the sound of the front door unlocking cut through the stillness. Both of us froze. The handle turned. And for the first time that night, I saw her face change, not grief, not composure, but something closer to fear. It turned out the sound at the door wasn't anything dramatic, just the neighbor dropping off a casserole with the awkward sympathy that people think helps. But the interruption broke something. She and I didn't speak much after that, and I went to bed with too many thoughts pressing against me. The next morning, I found her in the garden. She was crouched low, pulling weeds from the soil with bare hands, her hair loose and tangled from sleep. She looked nothing like the woman I grew up knowing. My stepmother used to be sharp, put together, heels, perfect lipstick, not a hair out of place. But that morning, with dirt smudged on her wrists and the robes slipping from one shoulder, she looked human in a way I hadn't let myself notice before. I watched her longer than I should have. She must have felt it, because she finally looked up. "You remind me of him when you stand like that," she said. It landed heavier than I expected. My father. The man we had both lost. "I don't want to," I said before thinking. She tilted her head. "Why not?" "Because if she kept seeing him in me, she would never see me." But I couldn't say that. Instead, I shrugged, stuffing my hands in my pockets. "I'm not him." Her eyes lingered, searching, then softened. "No. You're not." We went inside, but the words followed me. Over the next few days, we slipped into a rhythm, cooking together, sorting through my father's things. At night, I heard her moving through the hallway, restless, like sleep never held her for long. I pretended not to hear, but every sound seemed amplified in that quiet house. One evening, as we packed up boxes in his study, she stopped to hold a photo frame. My father, arm around her, younger, smiling like the world had been kinder then. I thought I knew how the rest of my life would go, she murmured, still looking at the picture. Now I feel like I'm unfinished. Her honesty disarmed me. I wanted to tell her I understood, that I felt unfinished too, though my life had barely started. But the words stayed caught in my throat. I could feel the risk swelling between us, even in the ordinary moments. She was my father's wife. I was his son. That line should have been unshakable. And yet, the way she leaned closer when she handed me books, the way her hand brushed mine a second too long, it wasn't unshakable at all. That night, we sat on the porch together. The air smelled like rain. Neither of us said much, but the silence wasn't empty. I noticed her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Without thinking, I placed mine over hers. She didn't pull away. And though no words passed between us, the look she gave me said more than either of us was ready to admit. The night on the porch stayed with me. Her hand beneath mine, the silence thick with everything we hadn't said. I replayed it until I couldn't sleep. By morning, I half convinced myself it hadn't meant what I thought. But then, the following evening, it happened again. We were in the living room, sorting through another box of my father's belongings. She pulled out one of his shirts, held it against her face, and for a moment I saw her shoulders shake. She turned away quickly, folding it with a precision that felt like defense. "You should keep some of these," she said. I shook my head. "They don't smell like him anymore." She looked at me, startled, as though I had admitted something she hadn't dared to say aloud. That was when the doorbell rang. She froze. I went to answer. It was my aunt, my father's sister, holding a bag of groceries. Her eyes swept past me, landing on my stepmother with sharp suspicion, as if she could smell something off in the air. "You look tired," my aunt said, stepping inside without asking. "Are you eating? You shouldn't be alone so much." I stayed quiet, but my stepmother caught my glance. She wasn't alone, not really, but we couldn't say that. My aunt stayed only 20 minutes, but the house felt invaded. When she finally left, the tension between us thickened. We didn't speak, just resumed packing, the air between us charged with the near exposure. Later that night, we found ourselves in the kitchen, both reaching for the same glass from the cupboard. Our hands collided, lingered. She pulled back sharply this time. "We can't, this is wrong." Her words landed like a strike. "I know," I said, though my voice cracked with everything I didn't mean. "I know." But she stayed where she was, too close. The distance between us was just inches. I could feel the heat of her skin, the way her breath faltered. My heart slammed against my chest, louder than the ticking clock on the wall. For a second, we leaned closer, not much, just enough that her lips parted. The kitchen light flickered, and the moment snapped. She turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. "You should go to bed," she whispered. I wanted to argue, to say I couldn't leave it like this, but I couldn't push past the guilt tightening in my chest. She was my father's wife. My stepmother. If anyone ever found out, she looked back once as I left the room. Her eyes were wet, conflicted. She didn't say another word, but the silence burned louder than any confession. And for the rest of that night, I lay awake in my old room, the sound of her footsteps pacing the hallway just beyond my door. The days blurred. Grief turned into a routine, sorting boxes, fielding calls, answering neighbors with polite half-smiles. On the surface, everything looked ordinary. Underneath, it was anything but. I caught myself watching her more than I should, The way she tugged her sweater tighter on cold mornings, the way her laughter sounded cracked and rare when it slipped through. And I knew she noticed me, too. Sometimes her gaze lingered a second longer than it should. Sometimes she pulled away too fast, as if afraid of what her hands might do if they stayed near mine. It all came to a head one night. She had cooked dinner, just the two of us, though either of us ate much. The wine bottle on the table emptied quicker than we realized. By the time we pushed our plates away, the air felt heavy, charged. "You're quiet," I said finally. "I don't trust myself to speak," she answered, staring at the table. That stopped me cold. I leaned forward. "Why?" Her eyes lifted, and for the first time since my father's death, she didn't look guarded. She looked raw, cornered. "Because every time you walk into a room, I forget what I'm supposed to feel." The words knocked the air from me. I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. "You think I don't notice the way you look at me?" she continued, voice trembling. "You think I don't feel it when you stand too close? I've been fighting it, but—" She stopped, pressing a hand over her mouth as if she'd said too much. I wanted to deny it, to pretend we were both imagining this pull. But my heart betrayed me. My hand reached across the table, fingertips brushing hers. She didn't move away. "It's not just you," I whispered. Her breath caught. The room went silent but for the ticking clock on the wall, each second louder than the last. She pushed her chair back suddenly, standing as if distance could save her. "This is wrong. You're too young. You're—" She broke off, shaking her head. "And you're his son." I stood too, instinct pulling me closer despite every reason not to. "I'm not him," I said, the same words I'd told her in the garden. This time, it wasn't defiance, it was a plea. She looked at me, torn open by conflict. "Then what are you to me?" The question hung in the air, impossible and dangerous. I stepped closer. She didn't retreat. My hand hovered inches from her cheek, not daring to touch, but desperate to. The space between us shrank to nothing, breath mingling, silence crackling with all the things we'd denied. And then, a sound broke the moment. The phone rang in the other room, sharp and insistent. Neither of us moved to answer it. But the spell had already cracked. We stood there, inches apart, knowing that once the next step was taken, there would be no way back. The phone stopped ringing, but the silence it left behind was worse. We didn't touch, didn't speak. I walked away first, pretending to refill my glass of water, though my hands shook so badly I spilled some on the counter. She stayed where she was, arms folded, breathing unevenly. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Coffee, dishes, the newspaper spread on the table like we hadn't nearly broken every unspoken rule the night before. But she was different. Quiet in a sharper way, like she was bracing for something. It came sooner than I expected. While we were boxing up old clothes in the bedroom closet, she pulled down a shoebox from the top shelf. Dust scattered into the air. She set it on the bed and opened it slowly, as if she already knew what was inside. Photographs. Letters. Not of her and my father, but of her and another man. She froze, one hand on a letter. I watched her face change, guilt, fear, then resignation. "You weren't supposed to see this," she whispered. I stared at the photos, piecing together what they meant. They were recent. Too recent. You were with someone else?" My voice cracked between disbelief and something darker. She shut the box too late. "After your father got sick, I couldn't handle it. I thought I was losing everything already." He didn't know. No one knew. The confession hit harder than I wanted to admit. She hadn't been the perfect, grieving widow I thought I was betraying. She had already betrayed him long before we stood in that kitchen together. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my chest tight. "Because if you and I—" She stopped, biting her lip. "If we go any further, it won't just be you carrying the guilt. It'll be me again. And I don't know if I can survive that twice. Her honesty tore something open inside me. Part of me felt sick, angry that she hadn't been who I thought she was. Another part, a louder part, felt almost relieved. The pedestal I'd put her on crumbled, and in its place was someone human. Flawed. Breakable. I don't care, I said more fiercely than I meant. Whatever you did before doesn't change this. Doesn't change what's happening right now. Her eyes filled, not with softness, but with fear. Don't say that. You'll hate me if you keep going. The words burned in the air. Before I could answer, the front door opened. Voices carried in, my aunt again, this time with two neighbors, bringing food, condolences, noise. We shoved the shoebox back into the closet, hearts pounding. By the time they reached the bedroom door, we were standing apart, pretending to fold shirts, our secret buried between us. But as my aunt's eyes flicked between us, I knew she saw something. Not the box. Not the truth. But enough. And the look she gave me told me everything had just become a lot more dangerous. The shoebox lingered between us even when it was hidden back on the closet shelf. Every word, every glance after that was heavier, weighted with what we both knew but couldn't speak out loud. My aunt's visit stretched long that day. She fussed over the kitchen, asked questions I didn't want to answer, and cast looks that felt like needles. By the time she left, dusk had settled over the house. I could breathe again, but barely. That night, my stepmother stood at the sink, staring out the window at the dark yard. Her hands gripped the counter so tightly her knuckles were white. I hovered in the doorway, unsure if I should step closer or stay back. Finally, she spoke without turning. I can't keep pretending. The words hit me like a match to dry wood. I'm tired of being strong in front of everyone, she continued. Tired of smiling when I feel like breaking. And then you. She turned now, eyes sharp and wet. You look at me like I'm not broken at all. Do you know how dangerous that is? I stepped forward, pulse hammering. Do you want me to stop? Silence stretched between us. Her lip trembled. I don't know. That was all it took. I closed the space, my hands trembling as they found hers. Because I can't. I've tried, and I can't. Her breath hitched. She searched my face, as if begging me to give her a reason to walk away, or the courage not to. You're his son, she whispered, one last desperate anchor. I'm me, I said, voice raw. And I see you. Not the widow, not the woman carrying everyone else's weight. Just you. Her tears finally spilled. She leaned into me, forehead against mine, and in that moment, there was nowhere left to deny what we'd been circling for weeks. We kissed. It wasn't soft or gentle. It was messy, full of years of regret, of days of silence, of everything we hadn't allowed ourselves to want. Her hands tangled in my shirt like she was afraid I'd vanish. Mine held her face as if it were the only truth left in the world. When we broke apart, she was shaking. If anyone finds out, they won't, I said, though we both knew the risk was real. She pressed her eyes shut, whispering, This could ruin us. Or it could save us. I answered. The words hung there, unsteady, like a bridge we hadn't yet stepped onto. Neither of us knew if it would hold. But for the first time since my father's death, she let herself breathe against me, not as a wife, not as a widow, but as a woman who had chosen, even if only for tonight. And in that fragile, stolen moment, we both knew there was no way back to who we were before. The kiss didn't fix anything. It didn't erase my father's memory, or the shoebox hidden in the closet, or the eyes of my aunt that lingered too long. But it changed everything. Once the line was crossed, there was no pretending we hadn't. The next morning, the air felt different. She moved through the kitchen quietly, her robe tied tight, hair pinned back like she was trying to rebuild the walls she'd let fall. I sat at the table with my coffee, pretending to read the news while every nerve in me remembered the night before. Finally, she sat down across from me, her hands wrapped around her mug, unmoving. "What happens now?" she asked. I had no answer. Not a safe one, at least. "Do you regret it?" I asked instead. She hesitated, long enough that my chest ached. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "No. That's the problem." Her honesty pulled the breath from me. We didn't try to define it right then. Instead, we kept moving through the days, cleaning, sorting, taking calls. On the surface, we looked like two people managing grief together. But when the house was quiet, when the phone stopped ringing, we found each other in the silence. A brush of her hand against mine while washing dishes. My arm around her shoulders when she broke in the middle of the night. Soft, hidden touches that meant more than either of us dared to say out loud. The risk never left. My aunt visited again, suspicion sharper in her eyes, and we both felt the danger of being seen. But the truth was, we didn't care as much as we thought we would. Somewhere between grief and confession, something else had taken root, not just longing, not just guilt, but love. The kind neither of us had expected, and both of us were afraid to admit. On my last night before leaving, we stood together in the hallway, surrounded by the ghosts of everything we'd lost. "I don't know what the future looks like," she whispered. "Neither do I admitted. Her hand slid into mine. "But I don't want to go back to being alone." I squeezed her hand, steady despite my own fear. "Then you won't." The house was quiet again, but not the same suffocating silence as before. This time, it was the kind of quiet that holds a secret, fragile but alive. We knew the world would never understand. We knew the questions, the judgment, the whispers would follow if anyone found out. But in that moment, standing together in the home we once shared with him, we chose something else. We chose each other. And for the first time since my father's death, it felt like a beginning instead of an ending. Sparkles, did you enjoy the story? Speech Balloon, what kind of stories would you like to hear next?